Hi, I'm Gina. Today, I'm going to be walking you through the course Deep Dive Building Your First Pipeline, available on learn.palantir.com. In this course, we're going to use Pipeline Builder, which is Foundry's no-code production-grade pipelining tool, to take datasets from raw to usable, clean data assets. Before we get started, a quick word from our founder.
Discover how Palantir customers unlock more value from Foundry and AIP thanks to our live instructor-led trainings. We are Ontologize, a group of former Palantir engineers who love teaching. We've trained thousands of Palantir users at leading organizations around the world. Unlock the full potential of your Palantir deployment by going to ontologize.com.
You're going to begin from learn.palantir.com, make sure you're signed in, and navigate to Courses. Once you're in Courses, you're going to go find Deep Dive, Building Your First Pipeline, and click on that. And importantly, make sure you register for the course. And now, let's begin. Let's start with the introduction. In this course, we're going to learn how to build a data pipeline using Pipeline Builder. Now, note that an end-to-end data pipeline can look something like this. We'll start with an external system, and then in Foundry, we connect using a data connection, or perhaps we ingest data from an API using an external transform, and then we'll have these raw data sets. Then we process the data, maybe do some extra cleaning, some joins, and then we have our ontology data, which is going to be our golden data to back our ontology. And when we talk about a pipeline, what we're really talking about is all of this in here. Now, Pipeline Builder is Foundry's no-code production-grade pipelining tool. The other option for production-grade pipelines is code repositories, which is the pro-code option. And in this training, we're going to be focusing on getting the data from raw data, where some of the raw data sets might not even have schemas, cleaning them up, doing some joins, and finally, we're going to end up with clean data assets. Up next, there's some information on what permissions you'll need and where to find help. These are the permissions that are going to be required for the course. And of course, an email for providing feedback to Palantir. The first thing that you're going to need to do here is set up a project. Now, if you already have a Foundry Learning project, you're not going to need to do this again. So first up, you're going to create a project if you don't have one yet, according to these instructions. And then, even if you've already created a project, you're going to need a course-specific folder for this course. So let's hop into Foundry and go make that. So here we are in Foundry. You're going to navigate to your files by clicking on Files and navigate to Projects. Now, if you don't yet have a project, you're going to click on New Project and make your project. If you do already have a project, you're going to click into your project and then click on New, click on Folder, and you're going to call this one Deep Dive, Building Your First Pipeline. And now you're going to click into that folder, and this is where our work is going to live. Let's return to the course. So you've done that step. And now we're going to begin the data pre-processing and cleaning. When we're building a data pipeline, our priority is to make sure that our raw data is ready for analysis. And so that's making sure it's consistent, it's accurate, and it's more or less clean. And so by the end of this section, we're going to have implemented this step, where we take products, turn it into clean products, take customers, and turn it into clean customers, and take transactions, which you'll notice has no schema, and get clean transactions out of it. Now you're going to hit Next. So now you have two options here. You can download the data sources right here, or your other option is to deploy the datasets via Marketplace. In this case, I'm going to be downloading and then re-uploading the datasets, but feel free to also deploy the Marketplace product if you prefer. So I'm going to go back here and download this, and this, and this. And this one is going to open up the file. So we're going to hit Control Command S, save it as transactions.json. And now we're ready to go upload our data. So go back to the course and hit Next. and next. And then we're going to hop back into Foundry. So here we are in our folder, and this is where we're going to make our pipeline. So here we're going to hit New and search for Pipeline Builder to create a new Pipeline Builder pipeline. Now you have choices here, batch or streaming. Make sure you choose batch. Here we're going to call this one Pipeline. And you'll see it's being saved in the folder where we started by default. And now we're going to hit Create Pipeline. Here we are in our empty Pipeline Builder pipeline. So here we're going to hit Upload from your computer. There's a couple other options here. Add Foundry data, add data to Foundry, and manually enter data. So we're going to choose this one and hit Choose from your computer. And we're going to grab first that Parquet file and the CSV. We'll hold off on the JSON for now. And now we're going to hit Open. And make sure you hit Upload as individual structured datasets and hit Upload. Now, I have some extra characters in my names, so let's go ahead and rename this. So I'm going to right-click on this one, hit Rename, and rename this one to Products. And then I'll rename this one. Right-click, hit Rename, and rename this to Customers. And then hit Save. Up next, we need our JSON file. So now the Add Data button has moved. So now it's up here. So you're going to hit Add Data, browse and upload from your computer, choose from your computer, and we're going to grab transactions.json. Now we're going to upload this to a new unstructured data set and hit Upload. Now you'll see that this one got named automatically. Probably not the best name. So we're going to hit Done and then right-click to rename it. So rename, and we're going to call this one Transactions. Let's take a look at this one. So Transactions is a data set, but it has no schema. So this data set is holding transactions.json, and that is that JSON file that we saved. And so at this point, we now have 3 nodes: customers, product, and transactions. And now let's move on. So we're going to begin by doing some basic transforms to help us clean the products dataset. So from here, you're going to click on Products. When in doubt in Pipeline Builder, always click on a node, and you'll see you have all of these options: transform, split, join, union, use LLM, generate, explain, and add output. So again, click on Products, and you're going to hit Transform. And now we are in a transform path, which is composed of a series of individual transformations. Now, it can be helpful, especially as your pipelines get more complicated, to make sure you name your transforms. And so we're going to name this one Clean Products. Now, first, let's take a look at this output table. And so here, we can see by the little dots in the product name values that they have trailing spaces. That's what these little dots mean. And so our first action is we're going to clean them up. So here, you're going to search for Trim Whitespace. Now you're going to click on Trim Whitespace. The expression, so that is what thing are we cleaning? That's going to be product name. Make sure you're overwriting the original column with the new column. So yes, you are replacing that old column. And now you'll hit Apply. Now, what else is wrong with our data? You'll see that price is a string, and price probably shouldn't be a string. And so here, you're going to once again search transforms and columns and search for cast. Now you're going to click on cast, and the expression is going to be, so the thing that we're casting is going to be price. You'll see it defaults to a date, but for us, we're going to choose double as a type. And once again, we're overwriting the original column with the new column. And now you're going to hit Apply. And now you'll see in our output table, it's reflecting those changes. So now price is a nice looking double, and product name no longer has any white spaces that shouldn't be there. Make sure you've hit Apply. You might have already hit it. It might be grayed out. And then you're going to hit Close. And now we're back in the graph view. And so here we have this Clean Products intermediate node. Now note that this is not yet a data set that we can interact with outside of this pipeline yet, before we're able to interact with it outside of this pipeline builder pipeline, we're going to have to actually deploy it as a dataset output, which we'll do later in the course. Now, let's move on to the next step, which is going to be some advanced transforms to clean up the customer dataset. So first, we're going to click on customers here. And if you click on it, it should show you the preview, which you can expand if you like. Now, let's take a look at this customer ID column. Right in this preview in Pipeline Builder, you can do some exploration right here. And so here, if you hit this down arrow and hit View Stats, it's going to compute the column stats and show us that customer ID is not unique. So that might be concerning because we might expect customer ID to be a primary key for this dataset. Let's see if there are duplicates or if there's something else going on. So we can Control-click to select multiple of these values and hit Keep Values. And that's going to help us figure out, are these true duplicates? And so here, if I sort descending by customer ID, then I can see these duplicates together. Now, when I look at a duplicate, so for example, this customer ID, it looks like this duplicate row doesn't contain any useful information. In fact, it's really just null. So we're going to want to get rid of it. So to clean this up, you're going to click on the customer's dataset and click on Transform. Now you're going to call this one Clean Customers. And now here, instead of just simply doing a drop duplicates, we're going to filter the rows. So we're going to filter out values that are null. So here, you're going to search for Filter Rows. Now you're going to click on Filter Rows. And we're going to be only keeping rows that are not null for certain fields. So we're going to look for email the column, not the string. So we're going to be not keeping, but removing rows where email is null. And yes, we want to treat empty strings as null. So we'll hit Add Condition twice. And the other columns we're going to be checking are name and address. So you're going to click on address and then we are good. So again, for all of these, we are treating the empty strings as null. And now we're going to hit apply. To check that everything went as planned, we can see here that there are no visible duplicates. But to really understand what we did and make sure it worked, let's do the view stats again so we can verify that this is now our primary key. Very good. Now customer ID is indeed primary and we're good to go. Now let's take a look at this address field. You'll see that address is technically a string, but it's in JSON format. And so we're not really going to be able to use that until we parse out those fields. So city, street, and state. Before we actually flatten this struct, the flatten struct operation requires a struct input, and this is not a struct yet, technically. And so we're going to need to parse a JSON string as a struct. So here, the outer operations, so we're going to be nesting operations just like you might do in code. So we're going to search for flatten struct. And you'll see here that we have no compatible columns because, again, this operation is expecting a proper struct. And what we have right now is a string. And so instead, the expression is going to be another transformation, specifically parse JSON string. So we're going to click on parse JSON string. Now you can grab a row of data from here, so copy, and then paste that in here. So we're using this JSON sample to infer the schema. And now we're going to hit generate schema. And you'll see this has properly identified the schema. We have a struct with 3 fields, and they're all strings. And now we're going to hit apply. And now we have to actually give it the JSON column. And so that is going to be address. And now we're going to hit apply. And there we have our beautifully parsed struct. So now we have city, street, and state. Note that we still have that old address column at the end. So now that we have these as 3 separate columns, that itself is useful, but we also might just want one single string that snatches them all together in an address column. And so here, we're going to search for another operation. So you're going to search for concatenate strings. Now the separator here is going to be a comma. And the expressions, the things that we're concatenating, are going to be street, city, add item, and the last one is going to be state. Now, the output here should not be called concat strings, but rather it should be called address. And you'll see it's overwriting that original address column, which we don't want anyway because it's hard to read. So here, we're going to hit apply. And now, in addition to having the separate city, street, and state fields, we also have a nice address column. Now, because we have that concatenated address column right now, we don't necessarily need a city, street, and state anymore, so let's get rid of those. So now you're going to search for drop columns, and we're going to drop city, state, and street. And now you're going to hit apply. And now we have a nice trimmed down data set. And now we're going to move on to the next step. So now that we've cleaned up the customers, we're going to move on to perhaps our trickiest yet, which is going to be a data set that has no schema because it's JSON. So make sure you hit apply and close. And now let's move on to transactions. So again, transactions contains one JSON file, and that's what we have to parse. So here, you're going to click on transactions and then click on transform. Now you'll see we have some suggested transforms, and you're going to search for extract rows from a JSON file. So you're going to click on this one. Now, once again, we're going to have to paste in data to auto-generate a schema. And so we're going to grab that string from the learn.palantir.com course. So that's going to give us a representative snippet of JSON. And so here we can hit prettify and then generate schema. And so here we have a correctly inferred schema. We have a struct, and we have all of the following fields. And here we're going to toggle off allow JSON values to span multiple lines because we only have one JSON file per row. And we're going to hit apply. And so here we have a nice looking tabular data set and everything looks good. You'll notice here you have some metadata columns like the error, there are none, and the file. Now, the problem is most of this looks pretty good, but units, for example, is a string, and transaction date is not really a date. And even more, there's also a time here that we're going to want to be able to capture in a timestamp. Let's start with this one here. So you're going to hit search transforms and columns, and you're going to search for, once again, cast. Now you're going to click on cast, and the thing that we're going to be casting is going to be transaction date. Now, the type by default is going to be a date, but instead of a date, we want a timestamp. Now, in order to properly parse this string as a timestamp, we have to tell it what format to expect. The default formats here are not correct. This format does not match the format of the incoming string. And so the Palantir Learning course is going to give you a string that you can paste in. So you can paste that right in here and get rid of these other one. Note that you can also use AIP to generate the correct parsing formats. You can give it a sample date or time, and then it will generate this for you, so you don't have to come up with it yourself. And now here, we're going to hit apply. And you can see that this is now nicely parsed as a timestamp. Now, up next, we have units. And so units is a string, but it really shouldn't be. Now, optionally, if you have it, you can use the generate functionality to say something like cast the units column to a double and hit generate. And what this is going to do is it's going to generate the transformations needed to accomplish this. And so here, AIP Assist has indeed come up with the correct expression. But if you don't have access to this, we'll do it again from scratch. So here, you're going to search for cast. And the expression that we're casting is going to be unit. And the type is not going to be date, but it's going to be a double. And now you're going to hit apply. And now finally that we've done this work, we're going to drop the unused columns. So you're going to search for drop once again. Click on drop columns, and the columns that we're dropping are going to be these metadata columns that we don't need, error, and file. And now we're going to hit apply. And here we have this nicely clean data set, and we're ready to move on to our next step. In this next part of the course, we're going to be focusing on data integration, joins, and aggregations. And so by the end of the course, you're going to want to end up with a pipeline that looks something like this. Now, we have already done this part, but this part will get done in the next section of the course. Now, let's go ahead and do it. Now, you might still be on this step. You might still have this open. Rename this node to clean transactions before you navigate away, and then hit close. So here we are, and this is our progress so far. If you want to have more real estate on your screen, you can always collapse this, and you can collapse this part by clicking on pipeline outputs. Now we're going to do our first join. In this join, we're going to join transactions and products. So in this join, transactions is going to be on the left side, and it's going to be augmented with information from products. So you're going to start by clicking transactions, and now you're going to click on join. So we click on join, and now of course this join needs a left-hand data set and a right-hand data set. The left-hand data set is of course clean transactions. For the right-hand side, it's going to be clean products. And now you're going to hit start. Now, before we get started here, let's name this transform to transactions x products. The join type is going to be a left join. Here we have the input tables. Note that you can swap these if you need. And then we have the match condition. You'll see here it is suggesting a join, but the correct one is we're going to be looking for product ID is equal to product ID. Now, this is a basic criteria, but note that you can also do advanced criteria, which allows you to do things like derive join keys on the fly and do contains joins instead of simple equality. Now, as we have it now, we're going to select the columns that are coming in from each data set. In this case, we're going to want to bring in variation ID, but not product ID. And you'll see here that now we get an error. And the reason we get an error is because there's going to be a colliding name in these two data sets. So to fix that, we're going to prefix the columns on the right-hand side with product. And now the error is gone. So now we have the correct column selected, and now we're going to hit apply and close. And now let's move on to the next portion. Now that we have this data set, transactions with products, we're going to join customers into it. And so you're going to start with transactions with products and click on join. And for the right side of the join, it's going to be clean customers. And now you're going to hit start once again. And so here, let's rename this transactions x customers. And so here, you'll see that we do indeed have a correct suggestion here that customer ID could be matched with customer ID. So we're going to select that one. And there we have our match condition. And now you'll see it auto-selected all of the correct columns. Of course, we don't need customer ID to end up in the resulting table from both data sets. So this is all correct here. And now we're going to hit apply and close. Now that we've made our transformations, it's time to actually produce some dataset outputs. So once again, these nodes that we have here are not actually datasets. They're just intermediate results, kind of like how when you're working in a Jupyter notebook, your variables are your intermediate results until you actually save them as, say, a CSV. So our next step here is to output these as datasets. We're going to start with transactions with products. And so from this node, you're going to click on that gold add output and click on new dataset. You have 4 options here, but we're going to choose new dataset. And you're going to call this one joined transactions products. Now, that's one data set. Let's go add another. So you're going to click on transactions with customers, click on the gold add output, click on new data set, and we're going to call this one joined transactions products customers. Now, we're still not done. We have to save our changes. And now you'll see here, both of these data sets say they're not yet deployed, which means they are not built. That means they are not ready to use. In order to change this, you're going to hit deploy And then on the bottom, once again, deploy pipeline. Now, while our data sets are deploying, let's go take a look at our next steps. So in our next steps, we're about to identify a bad join. When you do transformation on your data, you're going to want to make sure that transformation worked as expected. So part of that exploration, you can do some level of exploration right here in Pipeline Builder, but you also might want to go open this in Contour and do your drill down there. And so in this case, we're about to notice that our join dataset has a grand total of 172 rows, whereas transactions itself only had 50 rows. So that means that this join exploded. We're going to have to do our investigation, and we're going to do it in Contour. So by this point, your datasets have finished deploying. And again, we can verify what we saw in the curriculum, which is that this dataset here, if we look at preview, you'll see indeed it has 172 rows, whereas transactions only had 50 rows. So something is clearly going wrong here. In order to figure out what went wrong here, you're going to click on this dataset and click on Analyze in Contour. So you're going to click on Analyze in Contour. And here we are in Contour. If you haven't seen Contour before, Contour is Foundry's point-and-click analytical tool for datasets. And so here, let's save our Contour analysis before we even get started. And we're going to call this one Products with Transaction Join Analysis. And now you're going to hit save. And let's begin our process. So first, we're going to insert a board, and we're going to start with a histogram. So you're going to hit Find a Board, and you're going to search for histogram, or you can see that it's right here. So let's click on histogram. You're going to hit Select Column, and it's going to be a transaction ID. And we're going to be looking at the count of that. And so here, we're going to hit Compute. And we can see that some of these transaction IDs are appearing 9 times, which means we have some serious duplication. Let's drill into it. So first, let's click on the top result. And you'll see here, that is going to add a filter. So we're now keeping rows where the transaction ID is this one. And now let's hit Show Data. So we're going to click on Show Data. And so these are our 9 rows that are very duplicated. Now, what you'll notice here is that all of the column values are the same for the columns that came from transaction. So unit, transaction date, customer ID, variation ID, even product ID. But you'll see here, coming from the product side, the price is different, the product name is different, the product category is different, and the product variation is different. So what this is telling us is that the product IDs are not unique, but instead, each product has a unique variation ID, which is going to differentiate between products that have the same name, but are in different categories or have different prices. We're going to change our join to join on variation instead of product ID. So let's go back to our pipeline builder and make that happen. So back in Pipeline Builder, let's go into our transactions with products join and double click on that to open it. And we're going to change this condition from product ID to variation ID and variation ID. And now we're going to hit apply and close. You'll see here, if we take a look at this join, you can see that there are now only 50 rows instead of 172, which means things are better. We're not going to save and deploy yet because we have some other changes to make. Now that we've identified and fixed a bad join, we're going to follow the next step to create an operationally valuable data set. And so here, we're going to use that join data set from the end to derive the customer lifetime value, which is a very useful metric for companies looking to understand the net profit that they can expect from a single customer over the duration of their relationship with the customer. So now let's go do it. So from Pipeline Builder, and starting from transactions with customers, you're going to click on Transform, and you're going to call this one Customer Lifetime Value. Now, the first thing that you're going to do is compute the revenue per transaction. So you're going to search for Multiply. You're going to click on Multiply, And the things that we're going to be multiplying units times the price. And now that output column should not be called multiply, it should be called revenue. And now we're going to hit apply. And now we have this, but it's on the level of transaction, and we want this on the level of customer. So you're going to search for aggregate next. You're going to click on aggregate. And we're going to be grouping by 3 columns. So we're going to be grouping by customer ID and name and address. And then for each customer, we're going to be taking the sum. Notice there's a lot of different aggregations we can do here. We're going to be taking the sum of the revenue and hit apply. And here we can see that aggregated result. So we have this on the level of customer ID. And now we can see the total revenue per customer. And now let's hit close. So now, once again, this data set is not available to use in the rest of the platform yet. So we're going to click on this node, hit add output, and then hit new data set once again. And we're going to call this one customer lifetime value. And now that we've created that last data set, we're going to hit save and deploy. And then deploy. Now, while this is deploying, notice that our graph has gotten a bit messy. So if you ever find that happening to your graph, you can always hit layout nodes at the top. And it's going to reorganize things to look a little bit better. Now, once you see this blue toast, you'll know that you've successfully deployed your pipeline, and now we're ready to move on. Note that for the scope of this course, you're now done building, but we're going to move on and talk about the other things that you can do with Pipeline Builder and additional capabilities to be aware of. So at this point, we've laid the groundwork. We've gone through the basics of how to build a pipeline using Pipeline Builder. Let's talk about some other Pipeline Builder capabilities. So one of the great capabilities of Pipeline Builder is it's able to work with streaming. And so that means that it's appropriate for when you're working in very time-sensitive scenarios where you can't afford any latency. And so that is one additional capability of Pipeline Builder. The other thing that Pipeline Builder can do is output directly to the ontology. In this exercise, we outputted to datasets, but you can also output to ontology objects. Note that there is still an output dataset being created, but it automatically creates the ontology object. So the output dataset does exist. You just don't have to do the object creation step. Now, while Pipeline Builder is a fundamentally no-code tool, it does support the integration of user-defined functions or UDFs. And so if you need advanced capability in Pipeline Builder that it doesn't natively support, then you can use a UDF for that. Now, the thing to know about UDFs is you shouldn't use them if you don't have to, because using the built-in transformations in Pipeline Builder is going to be a lot more efficient, and typically that will have better performance. But if you do need custom capabilities, they can be a great option. Now, up next, we have some wisdom about how to segment your pipeline and materialize outputs. Something to consider is that you don't want your data pipelines to get too complicated. Of course, some complexity is going to be expected, especially when you're working with messy, real-world data. But something to consider is that when you have so many nodes in your Pipeline Builder pipeline, it can start to become overwhelming to your collaborators. And so you should keep your Pipeline Builder pipelines manageable and interpretable. Now, another thing to consider when you're developing your pipelines is it's very common to break up your pipeline into the raw, clean, joined, and ontology stages. Now, the other suggestion here is to split out your pipelines by use case so that you're not going to have data for 2 totally separate use cases being derived in the same pipeline. You're typically going to want to have separate pipelines for that. So while there is no one single universal best practice, keep in mind it's important to keep your pipelines interpretable and manageable by avoiding doing too much in the same pipeline. Now, if you want to optimize for latency, you're going to want to make sure you're deferring materialization until the very end. But if you're optimizing for extensibility and readability, then you might want to break up your pipeline into more modular stages like cleaning, joining, ontology, etc. It's generally a good practice to treat pipelines like modular code, where you materialize your key outputs, you test your intermediate stages, and design primarily for reusability, clarity, and scalability. Now, lastly, let's talk about pipeline maintainability. Data pipelining and data engineering is not just about taking data from bronze to gold or from raw to clean. It's also about making sure it updates when its source updates and making sure that if there's a problem, you know it. And so one of the key things to talk about here is scheduling. Scheduling allows you to build datasets at a certain time or based on certain triggers. So you can configure them to build when, say, a parent updates or at a specific time, say, every Monday at noon. Up next, there's branching. When you're building for a production workflow, it is best practice to make sure that everybody is building on dev branches as opposed to main to make sure that you don't break your production use cases. It's also a good practice to make sure you protect the main branch so that nobody edits it directly. Now, second to last, we have data expectations. And so these are checks that you can set up to proactively monitor the quality of your data. So they can look for things like, do you have a unique primary key? Is your row count within an expected range? And so on. Now, the benefit of data expectations is that if the criteria is not met, they can either produce a warning and then therefore a health check, which can also alert you, or they can actually cause the build to fail. Causing a build to fail is an important benefit of data expectations because it can prevent bad data from propagating to your users. Lastly, we have incremental transforms. When you're dealing with large volumes of data, you're often going to want to only process the new rows coming in, because processing the entire dataset, if it's very large, can be wasteful. And so this can reduce the computational load and also speed up the pipeline. Note that incremental processing is available in code repositories and Pipeline Builder. And now you've completed the course. If you want to keep learning, you can try out the data engineering track. And of course, Palantir gives you the option to submit course feedback. Thanks for watching. We hope you found this helpful. Let us know what you want to see next in the comments.